Hi, Blue Verse. Welcome. Hi, hope you're having a good day. Please let me know where you're joining from, and welcome to this live. Good day. How are you doing? Please let me know where you're joining from. Today, we're going to be talking about studying. Naomi, once again. So let me know where you're joining from. I need to. Why is the name? The name is B Lulu Verse. Okay. So let me know where you're joining from, and we'll be talking about studying in Canada. And the focus today is going to be on 5 mistakes that I see international students make that ruins their study plans before and after. So that means that we're going to be talking about the mistakes they make before they come to study, like mistakes you make in preparing for your application. And we're also going to be talking about the mistakes they make after they've now arrived in Canada, based on my experience, what I've seen, and all of that, just so that you can also avoid those mistakes. So thank you everyone for joining. Welcome. And we're starting strong. So please let me know. Hi, Babushak. BIM. Let me know where you're joining from. And like I said, today we're going to be talking about studying in Canada. I'm going to be answering your questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the. Hi, Babushak. Come on, yeah. Hi. Okay, so I'm going to be answering your questions as well. So if you have any questions about studying, today is the day we're going to be talking about everything studying in Canada. Now, I'm going to start out by telling you that studying in Canada is one of the ways people use as a pathway. But I need to clarify, it is not, it is not, it is not an official pathway in that sense. But it can be used as a pathway to become a permanent resident in Canada. And I'll explain how. Okay. Hi, Babu Shak. Yeah, you can be home. Okay. You're like me, of course. We're all humans, so we're all alike. You're like me. Okay, so um, it can be used as a pathway to become. Hi, Tony Amadi, welcome. Tell me where you're joining me from. Hi, Malik Opna. Tell me where you're joining me from. And today we're going to be talking about studying in Canada. 5 mistakes that people make before they come, and then mistakes they make after they come. So basically, I was saying that studying in Canada is used as a pathway to become a permanent resident. Nigeria, Imo State. Oh, nice. Thank you, Tonia. Okay. So it can be used as a pathway to become a permanent resident. I'll explain how. So you come to Canada, you study, right? And after studying, it kind of helps you. First of all, you can become eligible if you study the right program. You may become eligible for a postgraduate work permit, and working in eligible for several programs. The first of them will be the Express Entry program, which I already told you about, okay? The Express Entry program. And the Express Entry program, if you study in Canada, then you get a postgraduate work permit and you work in Canada for 1 year of experience. It will help you to become eligible for Canadian Experience Class, which is one of the categories under the Express Entry program. So you can look at one of the previous lives that we've done where we talked about the Express Entry program. So that's one. Now, the second one is when you study in Canada, obviously you study one of the provinces. So in Canada, we have 10 provinces and 3 territories. Uh, the 10 provinces and 3 territories, as long as you study in one of them, most of them have what we call provincial nominee programs for international students, so people who have studied in their province. So in most cases, if you study in a province, you then become eligible for one of those provincial nominee programs. Again, one thing you have to be careful with when you're coming to study is to carefully confirm but what programs are available in your province? Do they have a provincial nomination program for international students? If they do, is the program coming to study going to be eligible for that? Because one of the things you want to is to make sure that you are ticking off it. It will help you to be eligible for several. Oh, I'm reconnecting. Otherwise, studying is generally supposed to be a means to an end, is not the end in itself. So you have to be looking at all the various things when you're making your plans to study. So with that said, there are several steps you should take when you're trying to decide to study. Babushak, I'm not really sure what you're asking about, but this line about talking about Canadian immigration. So if you're interested in that, please stay on. But I'm not sure what you're asking about, the app, or sure what that's about. Okay. All right. So like I said, studying is a means to an end. So there are several things that you need to be checking to make sure that you're going to meet those eligibility factors. So for example, if the province has an international students program for provincial nomination, you want to make sure that you're studying a program that after you study it in that province, you will now become eligible for that program. Again, when you work, some provinces have provincial nominee programs for people who have worked in their province. So already you're eligible for three things. In fact, there are situations where if you work in specific regions of the province, you may now even get extra eligibility or extra points for having done that. So all those things add up to help you become eligible for permanent residence. That's the reason why we say studying is a means to an end, but it's not the end in itself. It would only happen if you actually study. So I want to start out by sharing 5 mistakes that I see international students make when they want to study, before and after. So let's start out with the before. If anybody has any questions so far, please leave them in the comments and I'll respond to them as you ask. But 5 mistakes. The first mistake, and it's a very critical mistake, is not seeing the end from the beginning. A lot of people just hear, oh, just what's the fastest way I can get to Canada? Study permits. Why? Because the processing is usually 3 months and under. Oh, great. Let me apply for a study permit and go. It's a mistake. And the reason I say it's a mistake, if you don't see the end from the beginning, you are bound to make critical mistakes. Like I said, studying is a means to an end. It's a pathway that's a means to an end, but it's not the end in itself. And it's not always going to be a pathway. It's not for everyone. So there are people who definitely will not benefit as much from studying compared to others. As an example, if someone has an occupation that's currently in high demand, they may not necessarily benefit as much from studying as someone who doesn't and needs a little bit of boost, or someone who needs a boost in their CRS score and they just know that, oh, if I study for 2 years here and then I get 3 years on a postgraduate work permit, that work experience can help me get into Canadian experience class because the experience I have is not experience in an occupation in demand. Okay, that's an example of someone who may benefit from studying. Again, when we consider other factors, is not all they are not exclusive factors. We can't just say based on this one that you need to study. The point is you must see the end from the beginning. You must see for yourself that, for me personally, if I do A, B, C, and then I do A, B, C, it will help me transition through A, B, C. You must see the end from the beginning. So that's the first one. Hi, BOB 3903. Good day, Mrs. Esther Umar. Please, can I call me my dependent while studying early childhood educator in a 2-year program with a WIAC result? Vis-a-vis, when you say dependent, what do you mean? The rules have changed for coming with dependent applicants. So if you want to come with your spouse, for example, you cannot come to Canada to study with your spouse if you are not studying a program that is either a professional program or a master's degree program, PhD. So it has to be one of those programs. And if it's a master's degree program or a PhD, the length, especially for the master's, because PhDs usually exceed that length, but a master's degree program needs to exceed 16 months in length for you to be eligible to bring dependent applicants. Again, that's if it's spouse. If it's other things, then you can clarify. Okay, so yeah, the first thing I've already said is start with the end in mind. Don't go and study without seeing the end. Everyone is going to study, yes. They're already in Canada, they are studying, yes. But you, for yourself, make sure you determine what the end is going to be. Where are you going with that pathway? where is it going to take you? How is it going to help you transition? If you have a long-term goal to transition, we have to admit that not everyone has a long-term goal to transition. Some people are going to study for the sake of studying. But if you're not studying for the sake of studying and you're studying because someone has told you you can use it to become a permanent resident, you must be mindful to have the end in goal, have the end in sight even before you begin. So what's your end goal? Make sure you're choosing a program that meets the end goal. Make sure you're choosing a program that both aligns with your future career goals and aligns with occupations that may be in high demand or occupations that can actually help you transition in a way. Make sure it also marks those dots of occupations that are in high demand. And that part is very important because a lot of people come in, they study, and when they're done studying, what we then find out is they are not easily able to transition that into getting a job offer. So like I said, if you're studying, the goal is when you finish studying, you'll be able to get a postgraduate work permit, which helps you transition into getting a job. But in Canada, it's not just any job. It has to be a skilled occupation. When we say skilled occupation, we're talking about occupations that are under the NOC, National Occupational Classification. They must fall under NOC 0, 1, 2, or 3. If you're not able to land those jobs. And so, to be honest, when you come to study, there are a lot of jobs. You will find jobs at Superstore, for example. You will find jobs at Winners. They're very easy to find those jobs. McDonald's will always hire, KFC, Tim Hortons. They are hiring round the clock. But most of the time, the jobs they are offering are not NOC 0, 1, 2, 3 jobs. They will offer you jobs that will help you pay the bills. So those are transition jobs. But you must be considering studying something that would give you ease into entering the job market. So that brings me to point number 3. Something that will give you ease into entering the job market. A quick tip for that is usually programs that are tied to a co-op. You'll see it when you're doing the school application process. Programs that are tied to a co-op, because programs that are tied to a co-op is, in some countries, what we call it is an internship. I know in Nigeria we call it an internship. Some countries call it an internship. It's an internship. They can call it a co-op, they can call it a practicum. Sometimes it's paid, sometimes the period itself is not paid because it might be 6 weeks, it might be under 6 weeks, it might not be paid. Most times it will be paid. If you go through a co-op program, a practicum program, it gives you some kind of benefit, and the co-op usually happens at the end of the program. So once you've done it, you're already ready to enter the work market, right? The labor market. So the advantage of the co-op is that it helps to introduce you to the job market. The institution in most cases will help you with placements. So once the institution has placed you in a workplace, the rest of the ball is in your court. It's your own responsibility to now work hard. It's your responsibility to network at your place of work so that they can give you a full-time job when you're done. It's your responsibility to network. It's your responsibility to do the job the way you're supposed to do. It's your responsibility to be respectful, come on time, follow all the rules at the workplace. That's your own job. But what the co-op would do for you is it would introduce you into the job market, the labor market. It's giving you at least one employer, and then from there you can start to build and determine what happens next. So my advice would be, number 3, when you are looking for a program to study, look for a program that has a co-op or practicum unit on it, because that kind of gives you a little ease, a little transition into getting into the job market. I'll answer a question from Tonia Amadi. Can I study personal support worker with WAEC? Sonia, give me a second. I need to look at just general requirements because there are different programs. But let me look at just general requirements for that program so that I don't just give you a general answer. So give me 1 second. Everyone, please welcome. Thank you for joining. Please let me know where you are joining us from. If you have any questions so far, we're talking about studying in Canada and the typical mistakes that people make before coming to study and after they come to study. So far, I've talked about 3 mistakes, and I'm just answering a question from Tonia And when I'm done answering this question, I'll talk about the fourth and the fifth mistake. I'll tell you for free, the fourth mistake is a very important one. Tonya, the factors for studying personal support worker is what I want to look into for you. If anyone else has any question, but in the meantime, please let me know. Have you studied abroad before? Is this your first time considering studying abroad? And if so, what would you like to study? Let me know. Please let me know in the comments. Have you studied abroad before? What have you learned about studying in Canada so far? What have you learned about studying in Canada so far? Give me 1 second. Um, so to answer your question, Tonya Amadi, I'll just pull up one of the personal support worker programs just to let you know, like, okay, what do they generally require? So the personal support worker, if you're coming with a WIREC certificate, typically you will be applying for a 1-year post-secondary certificate, right? Or what else? Yeah, most of them are 1-year post-secondary school certificate. And general requirements just based on one, a college certificate. Give me 1 second. So the general requirements for the program would be WIAC, yeah. So you can get in with WIAC. They also sometimes require you to take an English test. But WIAC itself, you can get into the program. I hope that answers your question, Tonya. MBBS program updates. Joanna, what do you mean? BSOBs, the pen I'm talking about is my kids and my husband. BSOBs, like I explained, you will not be able to come with your husband if you're not doing a master's program or a PhD program. And if it's a master's program, it must have a duration of at least 16 months for you to be able to come with your husband. The kids is a different conversation. You may be able to come with your kids, but you're definitely not going to be able to come with your husband on that program. Naomi, HR professional specialized in recruitment looking to study a postgraduate degree program in project management. Which provinces are best known to hire HR professionals, please? Naomi, that's a great question. One of the challenges with that question is that the answer changes, it's not static. So if I give you an answer now, it will be the same for the next 1 or 2 years, but the answer changes. So don't think that this is just the general rule about that. The answer will change depending on when you are coming to study. So for a HR professional, let's look at the job outlook for you, okay? I'll give you a response now. Guys, I don't want to chase people away, so stop asking me questions that are so specific. Do I have physics? Do I have this thing? Those kind of questions, the other people would lose interest. Human resource. Okay, so let's look at an HR officer, HR specialist, right? The best provinces for somebody who wants to study HR or who is an HR specialist across Canada. If you go to Newfoundland and Labrador, you have a moderate chance of getting a job, right? Prince Edward Island, still moderate. Nova Scotia, moderate. New Brunswick, moderate. In Quebec, is very limited, and in most cases, you can't even go to Quebec anyway. Ontario is very limited. Manitoba is limited. Saskatchewan is moderate. Alberta is limited. British Columbia is limited. Yukon Territory is good. So the only place that's really good for you is Yukon Territory. But in most of the provinces, it's very limited for HR professionals. You may want to consider transitioning into something else. In most provinces, Canada-wide is limited, but your best options look like to be in Atlantic Canada. Okay? Um, Hi, Joy Wusu. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. You're welcome, Tonya Amadi. Question from Moksomi. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing it. Well done, Ma. What do you think about bringing your dependents but sponsoring a 16 months program with Empower? Okay, Moksomi, you just asked a good question, and that brings me to finances. The fourth mistake that a lot of people make. I want you to understand something in response to your question. You can sponsor an application with Empower, but, and it's a big but, you're still going to need to show three things. One, that you have money in your own right, strong enough ties to your home country, money in your own right so you can support your education in your own right, right? And then, most importantly, you will need to show that ultimately you're going to go back to your home country, because one of the challenges with these loans is that it's tied to you now working and paying back. So those are a few things you should consider. I don't have chemistry and physics, but I have biology. I have more than 6 credits. Tonya, that needs to be a personal. You need to contact me privately so that we can check what kind of programs you're eligible for, okay? What is the chance of getting a study permit and spousal open work permit if Empower is sponsoring? You would need to also show money in your own right. If you can show money in your own right and show a plan to repay that money that doesn't involve you staying permanently in Canada, then you should be fine. Fola and the Folani, hello. Hello, Fola. Naomi, thank you. You're welcome, Naomi. Joanna, thank God, MBBS program in Canada. It's very difficult to get into an MBBS program in Canada, Joanna, if I'm being honest, as a first degree. Even for Canadians, it's very difficult for most of them to get into the programs. So it will be very difficult. I can't just tell you that you're going to have a walk in the park trying to get into that program. But you can definitely apply. It's more likely that you get into a public health program, those kind of programs here. But MBBS, is tougher. Fola and the Folani, you retracted a message, so I don't know what you were saying. All right, now let's talk about finances, because it's a big one. A lot of the time when people are coming to study in Canada, they do not consider finances enough. The thing with finances is you can't think of studying and be thinking of finances as a last resort. I want us to go directly to the study page for Canada so that we can understand what is required, okay, when it comes to finances. Because a lot of people, when they apply and get a refusal from the visa officer, they're like, why? I showed so and so amount of money. Why was my application denied? So if you go to the website, study permits, get the right documents, it tells you clearly the first three things that you must have. First, you must have tuition fees for the course or program of your studies, right? You must have the tuition fees. Secondly, you must have living expenses for yourself and any family members that are coming with you when you are coming to study in Canada. And third, you must have transportation to transport yourself to Canada and from Canada. That means you must have the money to pay for a return ticket, even if you're not buying a return ticket when you come. You must be able to show a visa officer, here, I have money for a return ticket. Here, I have money for the living expenses. Here, I have money for my tuition. In fact, the tuition one is not here, I have money. You will show them that you have paid the tuition. Okay? So, let's get into the details of that. What does that mean? Typically, if you're studying a one-year program in Canada, IRCC expects that you will show them that you have enough money for that 1 year. They must see the money for the 1 year. If it's a 1 year program, they must see all the money you need. It must be upfront. But if you're studying more than a 1 year program, then at least they must see the money for that first year. And they must see a source that you're going to use to pay for the other years. Is that one clear? Please help me, ask me any questions if you don't understand. Feel free to leave a comment, but it is clear, right? If you're studying a 1 year program, everything you need for that 1 year program, you must show it. So for example, your school fees is 20K. IRCC expects that the fees is paid. Your living expense, because it's just you, is 22,000 what? Give me 1 second so that I don't say the wrong amount. Your living expense should be 22,895. You should be able to show it. You cost of transport, let's say you're coming from Nigeria to Canada, generally the cost of transportation from Nigeria to Canada and back is somewhere between 2000 to 2005. In most cases, if you buy very close to summer, it may be a little higher, but generally let's think 2,000 Canadian dollars to 2,500 Canadian dollars. You should have that money. So if you total that one for the first year, they should see the money. Are we together on that one? they should be able to see the money in your application. That's the first part. The second part is they can see the money, but IRCC wants to also see that you were able to afford the money consistently. When they ask for a bank statement, the general requirement for African applicants, or specifically from Nigeria, is 1 year. I mean, 6 months is 6 months. General requirement is to show 6 months of a bank statement. So when the visa officer is looking at 6 months of your bank statement, they want to know if you're telling them today, I can afford to study in Canada. Remember, studying is a privilege, it's not a right. They don't owe it to you to allow you to study in Canada. So it's a privilege, it's not a right. Now, for them to give you that privilege, they want to understand, can you afford to study? If you can afford to study today, as in today is March, is it March? Yeah, March 22nd, 2026. If you can afford to study today, March 22nd, 2026, if you can show us that you've paid tuition, that you have the living expenses 22,895, and you have cost of transport 2,500, depending on where you're coming from, right? You can show us that you have all of this money, which is about 45 to 50,000 Canadian dollars. Um, you have it as at March 22nd, 2026. We now want to see your bank statement back to 6 months ago. Is it realistic that you could have afforded it even 6 months ago? Could you have consistently afforded it? Is it something that matches with your lifestyle, or is just that you've gone to go and put money in your account and your account now is looking as if you can afford it? Those are the questions that they're asking. Do you understand? And that's what they're trying to see when they're asking you, show me 6 months of a bank statement so that you can understand that. Okay, I'm going back into the comments just to see what you're saying. A sauce like a job? Yeah, it can be anything. It can be anything. This is really informative. Thank you, man. You're welcome, Tonya. Can 4 months bank statement work without raising an eyebrow? They asked for 6 months. The expectation is 6 months. And there's country-specific lists of requirements on that country-specific list. So check for your country of origin. If your country of origin says 6 months and you are showing 4 months, just hope that a visa officer is happy on that day. Rashidat Mustafa, hello SA, thank you for all you do. Please, I'm currently in Canada, resuming for a master's program in fall. When I want to apply for my husband's open work permit, do I still have to show finances, and how? The general rule, Rashidat, any application you are making, whether you're inside Canada or you're outside Canada, treat it like a unique first-time application from outside Canada. That's the general rule. My advice would be show finances. That person will need to take care of themselves. Now, the truth is, it is an open work permit application. So the expectation is that that person is coming to work. They don't necessarily need to show money, but they're coming to work. We cannot guarantee you that they will find a job. All we can tell you is that we are going to give you an open work permit. Because of that, you need to show how will you take care of the members of the family. So when IRCC is assessing that application, unfortunately, they are now looking at the applicant, the student themselves, the initial applicant. I'm not talking about the open work permit applicant now, because that's the principal applicant at that time. But IRCC is going to be looking at the applicant itself, the student. The student came in, they showed XXX to study. Assuming this person, their spouse, comes in and the spouse is not able to find a job, would they be able to take care of the student who is studying so that the student can continue to study? And the spouse who is coming in, who's not able to find a job, do they have enough funds to take care? So it's not uncommon for RCC to try to look at the student and say, how much do they have and is it enough to cover both of them? So keep that in mind, and I hope that answers your question. So yeah, considering all of that, right? Considering the funds that we've talked about, and all the other 4 points before, I'll now go to the final and the most important part. Number 5, the fifth mistake I see a lot of people make before they even come to Canada. And a lot of the people that I've worked with in the last 6 months to 1 year have fallen victim of this. And I'll tell you what it is. When people are coming into Canada to study, it almost feels like they are getting advice from any and everybody. And any and everybody will tell you, listen, say whatever you want to say, say whatever you need to say to get that study permit. But it's a lie. They are lying to you. You know why? One of the trickiest positions to be in is when you come into Canada to study. One of the trickiest positions to be in is when you come into Canada to study. Why? You are in a country as a foreign national. You must obey the rules in Canada. What does that mean? It's two things you must keep in mind now. And I'm telling you, especially for those of you who are not yet in Canada, but also for those of you who are in Canada and are trying to learn, okay? For you who is not yet in Canada, when you come to Canada on a study permit, you must comply with the rules that you have been given. Otherwise, you are just giving money to Canada. You're just spending your money. Ultimately, when it is time for the next thing, whether it is a postgraduate work permit, whatever application you are making, whatever mistakes you make while you are a student in Canada will come back to haunt you. If you come to Canada, you don't have the money, then you now start working under the table or working extra hours. When you come to apply for your postgraduate work permit, you will most likely face a denial. Ask people who are in Canada who are dealing with that. That's just the way it is. So keep that in mind. But more importantly, those of you who are outside Canada,